Welcome back. Today, we're diving into Chapter 6 of Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. In this chapter, Trevor shares one of the funniest and most unforgettable stories from his childhood, a story involving a mysterious demon, a lot of fear, and a secret he desperately needed to hide. Through humor and clever storytelling, Trevor gives us a glimpse into what it was like growing up in a deeply religious household while navigating the challenges of being a curious kid. Let's jump into the story. The chapter starts with a funny line from Trevor's mom, Patricia. This quote shows exactly what their relationship was like. She loved Trevor very much, but he was always getting into trouble and causing chaos. It's both funny and honest, and it gives us a great introduction to Trevor as a kid who always seemed to find a way into unexpected situations. So let's take a closer look at what Trevor was like as a kid. Why was he such a challenge for his mom? The chapter gives us plenty of examples, and one of the first things we learn about him is that he was always hungry. No matter how much he ate, Trevor seemed to be looking for his next meal. The first thing you should know about Trevor is that he loved to eat. He was always hungry, no matter how much food he had. His family even gave him the nickname the rubbish bin because he would eat almost anything. Whenever they visited relatives, his mom would bring an extra bag of food just for him. That way Trevor wouldn't end up eating all the food meant for everyone else. But Trevor's huge appetite wasn't the only thing that made him difficult to keep up with. He was full of energy all the time. He would run off without warning, even into busy streets, which scared the adults around him. Several babysitters, or grannies as he called them, eventually gave up because they couldn't keep up with him. Even so, Trevor wasn't rude or spoiled. He was actually a polite kid. He just had so much energy that it seemed like he could never slow down. So, how did Trevor's mom deal with all that energy? She came up with a creative solution. She would take him to the park and play catch with him for hours. She would throw a ball or a frisbee again and again until he was finally tired out. Looking back, Trevor jokes that this wasn't something people in his community normally did. It took him years to realize that his mom was basically treating him like a very energetic puppy who needed plenty of exercise. It's a funny story, but it also shows how much she cared about him and wanted to keep him happy and safe. As Trevor got older, all that energy started to show up in a different way. Instead of just running around all day, he became known for pulling pranks and getting into trouble. He was curious about everything, especially things that seemed exciting or dangerous like fire and knives. Trevor loved to experiment and test limits, which often led to funny stories, but also plenty of problems for the adults trying to look after him. And as Trevor's curiosity grew, so did the size of his pranks. At first, he would take things apart just to see how they worked, like removing the magnifying glasses from the school's projectors. Then his ideas became even bigger. One time, he filled the school piano with powder from a fire extinguisher right before an assembly, creating a huge mess. Later, he became fascinated with fireworks and started collecting gunpowder from them so he could make one giant firework of his own. Trevor was always experimenting, but his experiments often caused more trouble than he expected. As you can probably guess, this experiment did not go according to plan. While Trevor was working with the gunpowder, a match accidentally set it off. In an instant, a huge burst of fire exploded right in front of him. His cousin started screaming, his mom came running, and everyone panicked. Luckily, Trevor survived, but the accident taught him a painful lesson about how dangerous fire can be. When Trevor's mom confronted him about what had happened, he immediately tried to deny it. But Patricia stayed calm. Instead of yelling or punishing him right away, she pointed out the obvious evidence. Trevor ran to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. That's when he saw it. His eyebrows were gone and the front of his hair had been burned off. At that moment, he realized there was no way he could hide the truth. The accident had left clear proof of what had happened, and his attempt to cover it up was over. But The relationship between Trevor and his mom wasn't only about pranks and getting into trouble. As Trevor got older, he became smarter and better at arguing. Their disagreements turned into battles of logic, with both of them trying to prove their point. Trevor loved finding loopholes in the rules, while his mom always seemed ready with an answer. It became a clever back and forth that showed how quick thinking they both were. Trevor describes their relationship in a funny way. He says he was like a criminal mastermind, always coming up with new plans, while his mother was the police officer trying to catch him. They often found themselves on opposite sides, but there was always a strong sense of respect between them. Trevor admired how smart his mom was, and he knew that if he wanted to challenge her, he would have to think just as carefully and creatively as she did. As Trevor became better at debating, his mom found a new way to handle him. Instead of arguing back and forth, she started writing him formal letters. In these notes, she clearly listed the chores and responsibilities he needed to complete. To make her point even stronger, she included Bible verses to support her rules. It was a clever strategy because Trevor couldn't interrupt or argue with a written letter. By the time he read it, his mom had already made her case. But Trevor was ready for the challenge. Since he had spent so much time around his mom's office, he knew how formal letters were written. So instead of giving up, he wrote letters back to her. He filled them with detailed explanations, clever excuses, and arguments that sounded almost like they came from a lawyer. Their exchange could continue for days with letters going back and forth between them. It was a funny example of how intelligent and determined they both were, and neither one liked to give up easily. And Trevor didn't save his clever arguments just for home. He brought the same attitude to school. At his Catholic school, there were many strict rules that students were expected to follow. Trevor loved questioning those rules and looking for loopholes whenever he could. If a rule didn't make sense to him, he would find a creative way to challenge it. Before long, the school's strict system became another place where Trevor could test his problem-solving skills and quick thinking. At Trevor's school, the main punishment was caning. The teachers expected students to be scared of it, but Trevor reacted very differently. Compared to the punishments he had experienced at home, the caning didn't seem very serious to him. Sometimes he would even laugh, which left the teachers completely confused. They couldn't understand why he wasn't reacting the way other students did. Eventually, they became so concerned that they sent him to see a psychologist several times. But each time, the psychologist came to the same conclusion. There was nothing wrong with Trevor. He was a normal, healthy kid who simply saw the world a little differently. At the center of many of Trevor's arguments was one simple idea. He didn't like rules that seemed unfair or didn't make sense. One example was communion at his Catholic school. Trevor wasn't Catholic, so he wasn't supposed to take part. But he wanted the grape juice and wafers, and he couldn't understand why he wasn't allowed to have them. So he asked the nuns a series of logical questions about the rule. His questions were so difficult to answer that the adults struggled to explain their reasoning. This moment perfectly shows Trevor's curiosity and his habit of challenging rules that didn't seem logical to him. When the school complained about Trevor's behavior, his mom often saw the situation differently. For example, when teachers told her that Trevor laughed during punishments, she didn't immediately blame him. Instead, she questioned whether the punishment was accomplishing anything at all. Patricia believed that people should think critically about rules rather than follow them without question. Throughout Trevor's childhood, she encouraged him to ask questions, form his own opinions, and stand up for what he believed was right. Even when Trevor caused trouble, she valued independent thinking and wanted him to understand the reasons behind rules instead of simply obeying them. And now we come to the biggest act of mischief in the entire chapter. Trevor had always been fascinated by fire, but this time things went much further than a simple prank. What started as another experiment quickly turned into a major accident with serious consequences. Here's how it happened. Trevor and a friend were playing with a magnifying glass and some matches inside a wooden shed. They were sitting on an old straw mattress. When they went inside for a snack, they made one small mistake. They left the magnifying glass on the mattress. With the sun shining through the lens onto the dry straw, it created the perfect conditions for a fire to start. The fire quickly spread from the shed to the house, and soon the entire building was burning. When the family who owned the house returned, Trevor's friend immediately told them what had happened. Normally, Trevor would have been in serious trouble, but everyone was so shocked by the size of the disaster that they barely knew how to react. In the confusion, no one seemed to know what to do next. Amazingly, Trevor escaped without any major punishment, even though the accident had destroyed the house. So how did Trevor keep getting into trouble and still never seem to give up? How could he go through so many punishments and keep coming back with the same curiosity and energy? The answer takes us to the main idea of the chapter and helps us understand what truly motivated him throughout his childhood. It was something Trevor's cousin could never understand. Most kids would have been scared to get into trouble again after being punished so many times, but Trevor always seemed ready for his next adventure. So, what made him different? What was the reason he never stopped exploring, questioning, and taking risks? The answer, Trevor explains, was his resilience. Like his mother, he had an amazing ability to move past difficult experiences. He remembered what happened, but he didn't let fear control him. No matter how many mistakes he made or how many times he got into trouble, he always bounced back and kept going. That resilience gave him the confidence to face challenges, take risks, and keep moving forward, even in a world that often seemed determined to hold him back. With this takeaway, we are going to move on to Chapter 7 to explore more about Trevor Noah's life. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you there.
If you'd like more personalized feedback, writing support, and discussion sessions, they're available with me or with our selected tutors. All the details are here.